And the assumption was that this army would not last long, that this army was not motivated, the army was not sufficiently trained and disciplined and so forth. Well, I think those things were erroneous, but what the Russians concluded is that, contrary to their expectations, they thought that this smaller force was all they needed for national defense. They got an education in eastern Ukraine that wasn't the case, because they were facing a Ukrainian army that was larger, 450,000 regulars with another 200,000+ reservists. And they decided that we were going to back that Ukrainian force come hell or high water, as they put it. And that's why you had a dramatic change in Russia. So within a few months in the summer, the decision was made. We've got to mobilize more forces. We've got to expand the armed forces. Today, we've got about 740,000 troops in and around the theater that we call the Ukrainian War Theater. Of that, perhaps 550,000 are sitting in Belarus and down in southern Ukraine and in western Russia, ready to involve themselves, let's put it that way, invade, intervene, use whatever terminology you want. And they now have infinitely more modern, newer equipment than they did previously. They now have over 1,500 brand new tanks, more than 2,000 artillery systems, rocket artillery, missile systems. The truth of the matter is that what we have done is effectively expand, modernize, and professionalize the Russian army, creating something that did not previously exist. And by the way, it's not going to go away now.
Let me run for you a clip from our CIA friend, who, of course, makes the opposite argument. So just to set the stage for the clip, he was boasting about how weak the Russian military was in Afghanistan. That's how the clip starts. And then eventually, it's about 45, 50 seconds. Eventually, he comes around to his views of where the Russian military is today, decidedly different from yours. Jack Devine. Nobody knows Afghanistan the way you do, Jack, but that was the death throes of the Soviet Union. That was not Putin with a modern army.
Well, first of all, I dispute he has a modern army. He's now demonstrating to the world he doesn't have a modern army. He has a lot of modern weapons, but
he has a more modern army now than Gorbachev had in the Afghan days.
Yeah, but look at what Afghanis had, AK-47s. Look at what technology has done for the Ukrainians and all the sophisticated technology, from drones to cyber intelligence. His army is not showing itself very well. It's a surprise to all of us, although this is the second time I've been surprised. Because when I went in to do the Afghan program, I was assured they were 10 feet tall, and then every day they shrunk a quarter of an inch. So I think what's showing here, and I think it's the big story, he has paramilitary functioning as his cutting edge because his own army. Now they're fighting. Remember, Judge, you and I talked about dissent and how the things crumble when you start to lose. Watch the dynamic between the Wagner group and the military.
All right, when he says paramilitary, he must mean Wagner. And before we get into whether Putin's political stability is crumbling, which it doesn't seem like it is at all, please assess what he said about the Russian military.
Well, obviously, I think he's wrong, dead wrong. I think this Russian army is infinitely better than what they had back in the 1980s, and certainly better than what we saw in the 70s. I don't want to waste too much time going back over the Afghan.
No. There's no reason going through that. And I don't even remember how we got onto it. I was tweaking him a little bit.
I can point to numerous examples that we have. We have some video examples, reports from Ukrainians that have come up through the system without being altered. The bottom line is that the Russians are proving to be very tactically competent. They've learned how to fight very, very effectively in this different environment. So I don't share his views at all. In fact, I think the opposite is the case. I think the Ukrainians that began with a reasonably good force and a lot of very motivated people now have a few motivated people left, but the force itself is destroyed. And they are trying to fill it out with people, boys, young boys, women, older gentlemen from 40 to 60 that just are not up to the task. So I think he's dead wrong in all of that. But I think the Wagner group is interesting because people don't really understand what it is. It is a Russian national formation. It was formed for different kinds of reasons. Originally, it was.
Let me just stop you. Is this what you think he's referring to when he says paramilitary?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And he doesn't know what he's talking about, because there's nothing paramilitary about the Wagner organization. They have tanks, they have artillery. They are equipped just as well as the Russian army. In fact, with cutting edge capabilities, drones, and so forth. So I think he's sitting around thinking about Wagner as it may have been a year ago, when it was really much smaller and designed for military assistance and advisory work, much like our own military assistance and advisory brigades, which are small and very light. The Wagner organization now is brilliantly organized and equipped, and it's being very effectively led on the ground. And this bickering between Wagner, his famous leader Prigozhin, who likes the cameras, he's sort of a bella figura. He wants to be in front of the cameras all the time and advertise himself. Putin is kind of sick of it, I'm sure, but at the same time, Putin appreciates the hard work he's done. Putin's not going to allow that to get in the way of anything. And Gerasimov, who is ultimately in charge, what has he said to the media lately? Nothing.
Well, who commands the Wagner? Is it Prigozhin himself, or is there some line of authority from the general who's been silent down to them?
Yes, there is a line that goes from Gerasimov straight down to the top Wagner command structure. And that command structure reflects military experience, talent, and organization. It's effectively a core size element designed to operate independently for brief periods of time. But they're now closely integrated with the Russian army. Whenever they've had serious problems breaking through, whenever they needed more artillery or air support, they have gotten it from the Russian army. And they've also been supported by Russian elite light infantry formations like the airborne forces. So I wouldn't make much of the alleged dispute there at all.
You have pointed out to me and to others that in the past 24 hours, the Russian missiles have been a barrage all over Ukraine. You pointed out that Ukraine's air defense has failed to shoot down a single missile. You pointed out that the Patriot batteries, which we've given them, will not help against the cruise missiles. How devastating has this been in the past 24 or 36 hours on the ground in Ukraine?
Well, I think you should put that map up.
Gary, put the map up, please.
Right. If you look, this is the map of the entire Ukrainian state.
Right.
And all the red circles and areas involve strikes from missiles and drones.
Wow.
And they're all precision strikes. It's virtually all over the country. It was an enormous and massive strike. Now, their focus, with very few exceptions, was overwhelmingly on energy production and transmission. They wanted to bring the railroads to a standstill, which has largely happened. They wanted to deprive everyone, military and civilian, of energy wherever they possibly could. That seems to have worked. Now, they know from experience that the Ukrainians will double down and try to repair the damage as much as possible. But the damage now is really horrific. It's beyond their ability to rapidly repair.
Gary, can you put the map up again? Colonel, if you're sitting in the Pentagon, not you, Colonel Douglas Macgregor, but if you're part of the group that's doing what President Biden wants them to do, and you see a map like this, what do you say? What do you do? What do you advise? I mean, this is devastating. There's barely a section of the country that they haven't hit.
Well, I think you conclude that the Russians can do what we can do. And I think that's important to understand. Secondly, you conclude that contrary to what was advertised early on, the Russians aren't running out of anything. They're not running out of missiles or rockets or artillery ammunition. Their factories, their manufacturing facilities are running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're on a war footing, and they're putting out all the materiel that the armed forces need. Now, there was no follow-up immediately on the ground, Judge, because we're in the mud.
No follow-up by whom? By Russian troops
Russians.
moving into the areas that were devastated by the missiles?
No,
Why
there's
not?
not. Because of the mud. And I've sent you some videos of the mud. It's legendary. Remember, you've got 10 to 15 feet of black earth soil. You drive a tank or a truck, anything, off-road, off an asphalt road, any paved road, you risk sinking 5 to 10 feet into the muck right away.
Ooh, that'll stop the best of tanks, will it not?
Of course, it doesn't make any difference who you are. The Ukrainians are in the same bad situation as the Russians, except the Russians are not being bogged down, but the Ukrainians are. How do you retreat or withdraw from contact with the Russians with all of your heavy equipment? It can't be done. And they're sinking into the mud and the muck too.
I want to show you a picture from a drone of the devastation of a small village. This was taken this morning. It's a small Russian town called Zoloshiv, Zolochiv. I don't know where it is. Mm-hmm. It sort of shows the indiscriminate destruction of this village. I don't know if civilians have been killed. Just an example of what the missiles that the Ukrainians can't shoot down are doing.
Let's stop here for a second. First of all, this is near Lvov, which is the far western side of Ukraine. This is over near the Polish border.
Ooh.
So
well, that's pretty profound that the Russians are destroying villages in that part of Ukraine.
Well, you said the Russians are destroying villages. First of all, we don't know what was sitting there on the ground.
Right.
We don't know if it was an air defense site, whether it had a radar.
Well, no, I'm not suggesting war crimes. I'm just suggesting, I was inartful. I appreciate the correction. They're attacking areas where they believe there's an energy source, but it's very far west.
Yes, of course. But they may have also attacked it because there was something there, some supply depot of some kind. We just don't know. We didn't have a picture of it before it was destroyed.
Right.
And remember, you have several layers of targeteers. These are people that study the maps, look at the photographs, and then certify the targets. Those targets are then transmitted to the various batteries and then fired. We haven't had any role in any of that. We don't know what happened. Sometimes those targets are not valid. Sometimes someone mistakes a building for something it isn't, or it's being reported that something moved into the building that isn't there anymore. That happened to us all the time during the Kosovo Air campaign. We struck things and only to find out, well, we didn't hit anything. Now, I'm not suggesting that this time with the Russians in Ukraine. I think they've got a better grip than we did in Kosovo. And why not? They've lived there with these people for hundreds of years. They know where things are. It's not a mystery. Right. But the bottom line is we don't know what was there to begin with. They have tried to focus primarily on energy. They're trying to bring the state to a standstill, and they've just about achieved that. But they also hit some other targets, a few air defense sites, but most of Ukraine's air defense is being stripped away, and that brings us to the Patriot battery. And the Patriot was really designed to shoot down theater ballistic missiles. Now, those exist. The Russians do have theater ballistic missiles, and they could be used to protect against those. But they're not really designed to deal with drones. They can shoot down aircraft. But again, if the aircraft launches from a great distance, a set of cruise missiles, they may be able to shoot 1 or 2 or 3 down. But every time you shoot or engage with the Patriot, you're shooting 2 of your missiles. Now, if there are 50 or 60 targets, do the math. You've just expended 120 missiles. Well, where are you going to get more missiles?
Correct.
How rapidly are they going to show up?
Correct.
And this is problematic. We've trained 90 Ukrainian soldiers to operate the Patriot system. But I can guarantee you there will be contractors there from the West. Americans, Polish, German, in whatever uniform, civilian clothes, to supervise this because it's just too complex after a few weeks of training to turn over to the Ukrainians.
We're training Ukrainian fighter pilots in the U.S. to fly F-16s. How dangerous is that?
There are 30 to 35,000 Ukrainians training in Germany, the Czech Republic, Great Britain, the United States, Canada. They're all over the place, being trained in various ways. All of these people have to come back at some point and then plug back into the force. As far as the F-16s are concerned, I would not expect much from any pilot with only a few weeks or a few months training, and I don't think we do. And my concern is that if that happens, if we actually provide those F-16s, we may